Hello, everybody. I'm live on YouTube. I'm about to go live on Instagram and Facebook, so just give me a second. I seem to be live on Facebook and just doing Instagram. I hope it's working. Tell me if you can't hear me. Since I'm live on 3 different social media, it sometimes doesn't work perfectly. Okay, I'm live everywhere, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. So hi, everyone. I'm Colombe. I'm Now's co-founder. And like every week, we're doing a live Q&A at Now to tell you about our activities, what we have done, what we're up to, and some of the biggest issues in the world. But most importantly, what you can do about it. So let me know if you can hear me properly because I'm live on 3 different social media and working from home. The connection is not so great. And don't hesitate to already drop me all of your questions and comments wherever you're watching this live. I'm monitoring it and I'll try to pick up on it. Today, I wanted to talk particularly about 3 things. 1, Myanmar. 2, Hong Kong. And 3, what's happening with vaccines and with the pandemic. If you have any other question or any comment on this, you can already comment everywhere and I'll pick it up as soon as possible to answer your questions. I'm just watching at the same time. Perfectly. I see Yassine saying hello, Zoe saying hello. Hi, everyone. Already drop your questions. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was Hong Kong. Because we started one of our most successful campaigns at Now, which calls for the creation of a League of Democracies, which is basically democracies uniting, standing together to impose coordinated sanctions, protect freedom fighters, and better their democratic practices after the introduction of the national security law in Hong Kong. So let me quickly tell you what the national security law in Hong Kong is. It's a law that was introduced in July last year, so July 2020, that basically finished to crack down on human rights, democracy, and freedoms in Hong Kong. This means that for anyone who stands for democracy, who wants justice in Hong Kong, who wants a fair trial in Hong Kong, anyone who advocates for Hong Kong's future, they might face life imprisonment and extradition to mainland China. So this law is draconian, it's dramatic. And it was put into place to basically crush the opposition parties and movements in Hong Kong as they were gaining a lot of international attention. So this law was put into place and basically a lot of people have been arrested, a lot of people are in prison, in detention, or waiting trial for offenses committed, one, often before the law even passed, and second, for offenses that are ridiculous, literally for carrying a sign saying democracy or other. And this week, 47 activists have been charged under the national security law. And basically what they were charged for, I won't tell you the charge under the law, it's something like conspiracy to commit sedition or something like this. But the reason for which they were charged is that they organized a primary election. So in a lot of countries, parties hold primary elections to select the opposition candidates for the legislative elections that were supposed to happen last year. The elections never happened. The primary elections were unofficial. It was basically democratic parties coming together and saying, look, we will pick candidates. We will ask our members to pick candidates. And for this, 47 activists are risking what could potentially be life imprisonment. Yesterday, the hearing in court lasted so long that one of them ended up being transported to the emergency rooms. It is insane. What is happening in Hong Kong continues to be insane. At Now, we've always had a special attachment to it in a way because Hong Kong, personally for me, has always represented the way we should be protesting for democracy, the love we should feel for democracy and freedoms. A few years ago, I remember being super inspired by Hong Kong activists that were taken to the street in a peaceful, beautiful, and empowering manner, and it really struck me. And I know it's the case for a lot of activists across the world. When we started our campaign, we heard from activists in Venezuela. We heard from activists in mainland China, in Tibet, in Belarus. We heard from people all across the world that came and told us, look, Hong Kong for us has been what has given us courage to go in the street in our own country and protest. It has inspired an entire generation of people that are fighting for freedom and for democracy. And so this is why we're doing this campaign. And right now, to see what is happening, is extremely sad. It is extremely sad to see that 47 people who just organized a primary election in their country are, as a result, being imprisoned. And so, as you might know, we started hosting protests in July after the introduction of the law called Fridays for Freedom. So every Friday, we go in front of government buildings across the world and we ask democratic leaders to act. So to impose coordinated sanctions on authoritarian leaders responsible for crackdown. In this instance, on Hong Kong and Chinese officials responsible for the crackdown in Hong Kong. So this Friday, of course, we'll continue to protest both digitally because of the pandemic and in person across the world. And we want to have as many people as possible join us online. So at the virtual protest on Friday, we'll have one of our activists here in London. I'm based in London, that will join us. He's been protesting for 35 years in London for Hong Kong. He'll tell you about what happens. We'll also have people from Myanmar and Thailand that will join to tell us about the various struggles. But my point being, what is happening in Hong Kong is not an isolated event. There's been a widespread crackdown by the Chinese Communist Party for years, and it's only intensifying. And right now, people that are younger than me are being imprisoned for life, or risk being imprisoned for life just for standing for democracy. This is insane. We need to support them. So beyond joining Fridays for Freedom, I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to ask you throughout this live, as I always do, to take action, to go on the link that Andrea just shared on Instagram and that now just shared on Facebook and YouTube, which is a petition we're doing to create this League of Democracy. And we are targeting G7 countries to work together and impose coordinated sanctions, diplomatic and economic, and to use all of the diplomatic power to protect those freedom fighters. So please click on it. It takes a second. You'll be kept up to date with our campaign, and you will help us in gaining visibility, credibility, and in supporting freedom fighters all over the world. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about is Hong Kong. If you have any questions, please do ask them in any of the social media. I'm monitoring it very closely. And the second thing, which is a topic that is very related, is what is happening in Myanmar. So what is happening in Myanmar is gaining traction, which is great. So you might, I see Andrea asking what is happening in Myanmar. A great timing. It's a similar topic. It's also a fight for democracy and freedom. Myanmar has a bit of a different history. It has a very fragile history with democracy. It was under military authoritarian leadership for a long time, and then there was slowly some baby steps towards democracy. And in the last years, we saw this with critical eye, because the democratic leadership of the country was not condemning genocides happening against Rohingya people. But still, there were elections that were won by a landslide, and there was a path towards democracy. And then on February 1st, the military committed a coup again, because again, there was military authoritarian leadership before. And the military imprisoned democratically elected leaders, at first shut down the internet and prohibited protest, and basically it's cracking down on anyone standing up for democracy. And you have to understand in this context that, again, Myanmar has a very complicated history with that. In the past, protests were met with deadly violence, but still, Burmese people went on the streets. They are still going by the thousands on the streets all over Myanmar to protest for democracy. On Sunday alone, the UN said that at least 18 people have been killed by the military. Those were peaceful protests, and 18 people ended up being killed on the streets of various cities in Myanmar for protesting for democracy, for the release of their elected representatives, and because they were calling for democratic countries across the world to create an arms embargoes on Myanmar so that no more weapons could reach Myanmar, and for economic sanctions on military leaders and companies that are owned by the military and supporting military leaders. So this is what's happening right now. You have a coup, democratic leaders are being imprisoned, and protesters are being shot when protesting peacefully for calling for sanctions and for a restoration of democracy. Again, we have the power to do something, just like for Hong Kong, just like for every democratic struggle. Wherever you are in the world, you can call on your leaders to act. You can call on your leaders to make sure that this doesn't go without any repercussions. You can show the military leaders that the world won't back down and won't look away. So there's a lot of hashtags that are trending online that you can use to raise awareness with your family, friends, colleagues, anyone across you, like what's happening in Myanmar, save Myanmar, and so on. But you can also help us. Again, we'll be talking about Myanmar at a Fridays for Freedom virtual protest, but by signing the petition that is being circulated under all of the lives we are right now on. I'm just checking that it's being circulated, and I see that Zoe, who's an amazing communication manager, is circulating them. So sign this petition, ask world leaders to unite and to literally listen to the wishes of Burmese people that are calling for an arms embargo and for sanctions. This needs to happen. It's not okay, and it's never okay, that protesters are being shot on the street for asking for the democratically elected leaders to be released. So that's the second thing I wanted to tell you about. If you have any questions, again, I'm catching my breath at the same time, please ask them. I'm monitoring the various social media. So as I said, please join Fridays for Freedom on Fridays. It's a protest online and in person. You can find all of the info on our website and sign a petition for democracies to stand by freedom fighters in Myanmar, in Hong Kong, in Belarus, in Russia, all across the world. And then the last thing I wanted to quickly mention before telling you about some excited upcoming events we have is our Vaccines Without Borders campaign. So it's on the, let me back up 1 second. I see a question. Can one volunteer for this campaign? You can absolutely volunteer for all campaigns. If you go on our website and become a member, you'll have access to a forum that we have where you'll be able to interact with our entire global community. And on this forum, we'll help you get started by organizing Fridays for Freedom protests. Or if you're not comfortable going on the street yourself, by recruiting others, by contacting elected representatives to make sure that they actually act on Myanmar and on Hong Kong, to make sure that the G7 takes a position and imposes sanctions. So there's a lot of ways to volunteer. Go on the website, sign up, and you'll see there's a very, very smooth funnel to do just this. Now, I just wanted to jump quickly to the Vaccines Without Borders campaign, which I think is a super important campaign, especially now that we are entering March. So I don't know if you remember, but March 11th marks the 1-year anniversary of the pandemic. So in a week, we'll be officially 1 year into the pandemic. It started before, but it was declared at this stage. And on the positive side, I try to look at the positive sides. A lot of developments and very quick developments have happened. We have a lot of vaccines that have been approved and that are working well, which means that we have greater chances of getting out of this pandemic fast, which is what everyone across the world wants. However, and this has been the case since the beginning of the pandemic, and I hate to quote Dr. Tedros, but I agree, there's been a catastrophic moral failure. We have now a few rich countries that are holding all doses of the vaccines and leaving the rest of the world behind. Something like 130 countries haven't started vaccinating people. 130 countries. And then in the meanwhile, you have a few countries that have the global supply of vaccines just for themselves. And you might think, well, they pay for it, blah, blah, blah. No, that's not how it works. From a practical point of view, if only a few countries get access to vaccines, and even if they vaccinate their entire populations, we will not get out of this pandemic. Simply because the virus will stay within the population, the global population, which will create more genetic mutations. And this means that it will come to bite again rich countries. So rich countries will be infected by mutations that the vaccines that are already developed cannot actually tackle. It means also that we don't reach global herd immunity so that we don't get out of the pandemic. And then, of course, it has catastrophic, economic impact, social impacts, and so on for everyone. However, we can actually stop this. There's a very easy way of doing it. One is for rich countries not to hold doses. But the other alternative, which would happen regardless, is to increase the global supply of vaccine. And to make it super simple, the fundamental issue here is we don't have enough vaccines. We just don't. At this rate, we won't vaccinate the world before 2023 or 2024. But the thing is, we can actually change this quite easily. There's a lot of factories across the world that are ready to produce hundreds of thousands of doses of vaccines directly. But for this, they need the technological know-how and the intellectual property rights. And so a few countries this week, 119 countries this week, asked the World Trade Organization, which is an international body that deals with trade, international property, and so on, to suspend IP rights so that more companies can produce the vaccine And as a result, we can save more lives faster. Guess what? The US and Europe blocked this proposal. And those are also some of the countries that are actually holding most doses, leaving the rest of the world behind. I'm saying it with a sarcastic tone, but I'm actually extremely pissed because I think that this is insane. One, the fact that those countries are holding all doses, limiting exports and so on is completely unconscionable. And they will be judged by history for leaving the rest of the world behind extremely harshly. But second, now we have the possibility to stop this pandemic and to stop millions of people more from dying. It's as simple as this. All we need is for companies that have already profited from this crisis, and again, that have done a great service by producing vaccines fast, to share the know-how and the IP rights with companies in low-income countries. I'm not even saying everywhere. If they share it with companies in low-income countries, it means factories can produce more vaccines, we can have access to more vaccines faster, we all get out of this pandemic fast, we're all happy. And those companies can still make profit in rich countries like they're already doing in Europe, in the US, and so on. So it is insane. And really, I can't get it that countries like Europe or countries in Europe and the US would block this proposal by 119 other countries to suspend IP rights just for the duration of the pandemic. It is such a selfish and also very, very stupid approach because we will all suffer across the world from it. To give you a super concrete example, I'm in the UK. So the likelihood that I will get vaccinated before the end of the year is extremely high, even though I'm young and healthy. I will get vaccinated before people that are actually at risk get vaccinated in most of the world. Yet, even me vaccinated, which is, again, unethical, unfair, and so on, I will still be at risk if more variants emerge because we don't produce more vaccines fast. So this is insane. So clearly, a few superpowers are more interested in IP rights than in saving lives, which in itself is disgusting. But the thing is, we can actually try to take another route. A lot of organizations right now are working on pressuring those countries, and we will work on this as well, and it's super important. But we want to pressure companies to do what is right and to themselves share the technical knowledge and their intellectual property rights with other companies. Because this means literally tomorrow, all of those factories that are ready to produce vaccines could be producing hundreds of thousands of them at cost in low-income countries. So again, this is the moment where you take a minute out of your day and you help us spread the word and you help us change the world. So go on the petition that my team will be circulating right now. It's already done on Facebook. I think on YouTube, we're still missing them, Zoe. And Andrea will share it on Instagram. And you'll be able to send an email through this petition to the CEO of Pfizer so that Pfizer shares its vaccines with companies in low-income countries. I know I sound like a repeating machine, but it is extremely important. We need this vaccine to be shared, and we need to save lives through it. So do that. Take 2 seconds out of your day and help us save lives by making sure that the vaccine is shared. So on the campaign side, that's all. I see comments of desperate faces on Instagram saying that we need action and that it's insane and outrageous that this is the case in the first place. I completely agree. We need people to act. I also see a comment asking what's next. What's next is we will keep going with Vaccines Without Borders. We will keep pressuring. We're also planning some stunt actions across the world on March 11th to mark the 1-year anniversary of the pandemic to push manufacturing companies to share their vaccines. If you want to help us, if you want to participate, if you want to help the world get out of this pandemic faster, drop us a DM and we'll help you get started. And then second, ahead of the World Health Assembly, we'll target some countries as well to do the same. And we also have a lot of other work going as always. So of course, we will continue to work on freedom, especially ahead of the G7 meeting. We want to make sure that this League of Democracies is created and that we stand with Hong Kong and Myanmar and all of the other places undergoing crackdowns across the world. But we're also working on a campaign for youth economic inequalities. We'll give you more details soon, so I don't want to spoil it. But this pandemic has cost us a lot. A lot of people have died. A lot of people are very sick. But economically, it also has cost us a lot. And the youth is much worse off than before. And already in a lot of countries, that wasn't great. So we want to launch a campaign on this, and it's quite exciting. We're working across all continents with really cool people. I'm sure you'll like it. So that's what's next. But apart from this, what's next right now in the near future is that it's Women's History Month, and we are a week away from Women's Day, which is one of my favorite days in the year. And for this, we have quite a few events that are ready for you all. So one, on International Women's Day, we'll have an event with an MP from Tanzania and a local councillor from the UK to talk about female leadership. And, we often say the future is female, but what does that mean? What are the hurdles and obstacles that we need to overcome? And then the week after, we'll have an event with a member of the European Parliament and an MP from Austria to talk about the impact that COVID has had on women's rights and what we need to do to get back on track. So for Women's Month, we have a lot of things planned as well, and our communication team and volunteers also have a lot of really cool campaigns and social media actions ready for you all. So sign up, become a member, join our campaigns, become a volunteer, drop us a message if you have any questions, but make sure that you take action, because we cannot just stand on the sideline of history. I hope that you have an amazing day, and I'll disconnect now because speaking alone for 25 minutes is quite tough.